You are doing it right now. Maybe you do not realize it yet. But somewhere in the background of your mind, a calculation is running. You are measuring yourself against someone. A colleague who got promoted faster. A friend whose life looks better on a screen. A stranger whose body, apartment, or relationship makes yours feel slightly less than it was a moment ago. You did not choose to make that comparison. It happened automatically. And the fact that it happened automatically is the most important thing about it. You cannot stop comparing yourself to others. Not because you are insecure. Not because you are shallow. But because comparison is one of the oldest and most essential programs your brain runs. It predates language. It predates civilization. It predates the phone in your pocket by roughly 2 million years. And understanding where it came from changes everything about why it feels the way it does. In 1954, psychologist Leon Festinger proposed what he called social comparison theory. His central argument was simple and devastating. Human beings have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own abilities and opinions, and when objective measures are unavailable, they do so by comparing themselves to other people. This was not a theory about insecurity. It was a theory about how the mind works at a basic level. You compare because you have no other reliable way to know where you stand. Think about what that means. If you want to know how fast you can run, you could time yourself. But if you want to know whether you are smart, kind, successful, or worthy of respect, there is no timer. There is no ruler. There is no objective measurement you can take. So your brain does what it was built to do. It looks around. It finds a reference point. And it calculates your position relative to that point. The feeling you get from that calculation is not vanity or weakness. It is data. Ancient, imprecise, often cruel data. But data. The system did not evolve to make you feel good. It evolved to keep you alive. In a small ancestral group, knowing your social position was not a matter of self-esteem. It was a matter of survival. Your rank in the group determined your access to food, mates, protection, and resources. The individuals who paid close attention to where they stood relative to others were the ones who could navigate the group successfully, form the right alliances, avoid the wrong confrontations, and respond quickly when their position was threatened. The ones who did not pay attention were at a disadvantage. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the brain that compared was the brain that survived. Neuroscientist Caroline Zink at the National Institute of Mental Health has studied the brain circuits involved in social comparison, and her research reveals something striking. When you perceive yourself as higher in status than someone else, the reward circuits of your brain activate. The same regions that respond to food, warmth, and safety light up when you feel you are doing better than someone nearby. Status feels good at a biological level because for most of human history, status kept you alive. But here is where the ancient system runs into the modern world and produces something it was never designed to handle. Your brain evolved to compare itself to the small group it lived with. A village. A tribe. A band of perhaps 150 people, all of whom you knew personally, all of whom existed in the same physical reality you did. When you looked at the most successful person in your group, you were looking at someone whose life you could actually see. Someone whose struggles were visible. Someone whose advantages and disadvantages were apparent. The comparison was painful sometimes, but it was honest. Now look at what your comparison system is being asked to process. Not a village of 150 people who share your actual circumstances. But a global feed of millions of people, filtered specifically to show their best moments, their greatest achievements, their most attractive appearances, their peak experiences carefully selected and staged for maximum impact. Your ancient comparison engine, designed for a world of radical transparency and shared reality, is being fed a stream of the most optimized, curated, artificial representations of human life ever assembled. And it has no mechanism to correct for this. It cannot tell the difference between a real rival in your actual group and a highlight reel designed to generate envy. Psychologist Sherry Tickle at MIT has spent decades studying how technology reshapes the human mind, and her research suggests that social media does not simply show you other people's lives. It creates a new social reality in which the comparison never stops, the reference group is infinite, and the most successful, beautiful, and admirable version of everyone you have ever known or will ever know is permanently visible and permanently adjacent to your own quiet ordinary life. The system that evolved to compare you to 150 people now has access to 150 million, and it cannot tell you to stop looking. This is why the comparison that happens online feels different from the comparison that happens in person. When you compare yourself to someone you know in real life, you also know their failures, their bad days, their private struggles, their unflattering moments. The comparison is calibrated by reality. When you compare yourself to someone online, you are comparing your entire inner experience, including all of your doubt and fear and uncertainty, to their outer performance, including none of it. It is not a fair comparison. It was never designed to be one. But your brain does not know that. Research from the University of Michigan found that the more time people spent passively consuming social media, the worse they felt about their own lives, not because their lives had changed, but because the reference point had shifted. The same job, the same body, the same relationship felt different depending on what the comparison engine had just been fed. You are not comparing your life to other lives. You are comparing your life to a distorted mirror held up by an algorithm designed to keep you looking. And then there is the direction of the comparison itself, which matters more than most people realize. Psychologists distinguish between upward comparison, measuring yourself against someone who appears to be doing better, and downward comparison, measuring yourself against someone who appears to be doing worse. Upward comparison tends to produce envy, inadequacy, and the motivation to change or improve. Downward comparison tends to produce relief, gratitude, and the temporary comfort of not being at the bottom. Both are happening constantly, often within seconds of each other, and the emotional residue they leave accumulates across the day in ways you barely notice. What is particularly interesting is what happens when you compare laterally, when you look at someone who appears to be in exactly your position but doing slightly better at the thing you care most about. This is the comparison that hurts most. Not the billionaire whose life is incomprehensibly distant from your own, but the peer, the colleague, the old classmate whose life is almost identical to yours except that one crucial thing is slightly better. Researchers call this the local comparison effect. The closer someone is to your situation, the more their success or failure feels like a direct comment on your own worth. The further away they are, the less it registers. This is why it is easier to hear about a stranger's success than a close friend's. It is why siblings can feel more competitive with each other than with anyone else in the world. The comparison system is calibrated for proximity. The more similar someone is to you in age, background, and circumstance, the more directly your brain uses their position to calculate your own. There is no switch you can flip to turn this system off. It is older than conscious thought. But understanding it gives you something that the system itself cannot provide. Distance. The comparison your brain makes is automatic. The meaning you assign to it is not. The feeling of inadequacy that follows an upward comparison is the output of an ancient survival mechanism encountering a world it was never built for. It is not a verdict on your life. It is not an accurate measure of your worth. It is a 2-million-year-old calculation run on data that has been deliberately distorted by systems designed to make you feel exactly this way. The next time the comparison fires, and it will fire, you will probably not be able to stop it. But you might be able to recognize what it is. An old program, running on new inputs, producing feelings that feel like facts but are not. The calculation is ancient. The conclusion is optional. You are doing it right now. A calculation is running somewhere in the background of your mind. And now, at least, you know what it is.